Hi, my name is Don Giller, again. Presented here for the first time in color, the Letterman Podcast, episode 100, part 3.
Worldwide Pants proudly presents
The Late Show with David Letterman.
Worldwide Pants, the most trusted name in pants and entertainment and pants.
Everyone was aware that we were past the heyday of like the rebellious,
Yes.
like reinventing television Letterman, like the Letterman of the 80s, where it's unlike anything anyone's ever seen. Like
we're in a different
combination
phase
of like he had spent a decade doing that, and also, you know, he was on at 11:30. He was wearing a suit on stage. You know, he's at the Ed Sullivan Theater. We're on CBS now.
Yeah.
It felt like this is like, you know, prime time day. We want this to be like, they wanted this to be like a real, like, have like a broad audience. And I think especially for Dave, who, like, Johnny was sort of the star that he was steering his boat towards, like that was, and also Dave having now spent, you know, almost 2 decades on television, honing his character, his persona, like who he is, knowing who he was and what his voice was. Like, you really realize, like, the thing with Will, you realize, like, oh, it's not just be funny, it's be funny in this specific way.
Yes.
That's like exactly like fits Dave Letterman exactly.
The switch to CBS for Dave meant, you know, and it's interesting to me how the beginning of those years, everybody was like, it's Dave versus Jay.
Yeah.
I feel like, as somebody who was still watching the show, about 2 or 3 years into it, I think Dave said, fuck it. I do my own thing. I'm wondering if, you know, Les Moonves said to him, somebody said,
don't worry about it.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
You have a completely different audience.
Yep.
Go ahead and do what you do. It's a distinct offering, right? Yep. As they say in network television, it's a distinct product.
Yep. Yep.
And you watched him, and those are the years when, you know, he became such a good interviewer.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the unsung, you know, if you kind of look at, like, you're talking to me about those early years of Dave.
Yep.
You know, at late night,
the
early comic innovation years. Yep. And you end on the Late Show with the years of being really the best interviewer on television, bar none,
without a doubt,
because he was such a good listener.
So yeah, I was certainly younger, and I was one of the writers who had grown up watching Dave, whereas before it seemed like more of the writers had been people who certainly not. I mean, Dave aged as the years went on, and the writers kind of stayed the same age because they were replaced. So it's like Dave started out with his peers, and they started out with people who were more like his younger brothers. Then eventually it turned out it became people who were like his young enough to be his kids.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There were several pieces of it that helped keep the rhythm and the routine daily, which is so vital to just getting that on the air. So when we started early on, I think the production meeting was at 11 a.m. And so I would be getting in around 10:15 or 10:30.
Yep.
And then, you know, do some odds and ends and stuff like that. But then get into the production meeting, and I'm notating then everywhere that we need music. Now, obviously, each show, we know we're going to need bumper songs. We know the theme is going to be there, but play-ons for guests. And then the real wild card was what music for comedy segments would we need?
Yeah.
So I would notate that entire rundown and make that and, see where we needed stuff. And then I would get on the phone with Paul. And again, this is pre-cell phone. Car phones were a thing. So if he was driving, I could kind of reach him. But otherwise, you better be ready to go. He'll call in when he has a chance someplace, and you better be ready to go with the information.
Right.
And then it was just kind of dealing with some odds and ends. But the show then would sort of change as the comedy segments would come in, and Dave liked certain things and didn't want certain things. And so the music piece would sort of change from that. At that point, I think they were doing rehearsals at 2:00 for comedy stuff. So I'd sort of watch that a little bit and just sort of get a good sense of what would happen.
Yep.
And then the band would start at 3:45. So I'd make sure around 3:30 that people were getting in and everybody was where they needed to be. And also, if there were changes or anything like that throughout the show that needed really extra prep from the band or something, I'd be reaching out to them before also. Again, pre-cell phone, so a lot of beeper usage.
Yeah.
Just trying to get 7 people and talk to them was a bit of a challenge always at that point.
Yeah.
But the band rehearsal, comedy rehearsal would end at 3:45. And then we'd have the band would come on, and they really only had 15 minutes for the cues portion of it, the play-ons for guests, and any of the comedy music that they needed. Really 15 minutes. And then at 4:00, then the feature band would come on.
Right.
And if the guys were working, if the CBS Orchestra was playing with them, then they'd be part of that. And sometimes it was just the feature band, and then they would go and kind of do stuff. But I would then, during that 4:00 hour, I was the somewhat notorious stopwatch runner because they were so adamant. 3.5. That 3:30 was a magic time for what that length of song would be. And the producers did not want to budge early on with that. That got looser as the show went on. But initially, it was 3.5. And it was like, don't kill the messenger, sorry, but
Yeah.
they did not want it to run. So I was the stopwatch runner on all of that. But 4 to 5, and it was a hard out at 5:00. The audience was going to come in. And again, it was treated like a live broadcast, which in essence, then, that's what I think was so important, because you would have you never felt ready. And so you could drag it out until 7:00 and keep an audience going and whatever. So 5:00, doors would open, we're done, and you got to get ready because it's going to start. And so then the guys would go up and change. I would get final sort of notes from the producers on changes and get a revised rundown.
Yeah.
Then get the band down by around 5:15, 5:20. Then, Eddie Brill or, Wally, I can't remember his last name now. Warm-up comic, though, whoever was doing the warm-up stuff. Yeah, would do some stuff with the audience and then bring the band out. They'd play 2 songs. We'd do the band first and then bring out Paul separately for the second song.
Yep.
So I'd go up and make sure he was ready to go and keep him time cued and everything as well.
Yep.
And then Dave would come out for a short warm-up as well for what was a 5:30 on the dot start.
Yep.
And again, no budging on that. We started at 5:30. And, it was painful at times because you were scrambling. But again, in hindsight, it was so important to keep that rhythm and routine, because otherwise it does become like, I don't know when we're getting out of here. I don't know when we're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, so the way it worked was you had heads of departments. You had like the head of mailbag and the head of remotes, and the Stangl brothers were the head of remotes, and they were and remotes was on Friday when we weren't shooting a show. Dave would go out and shoot a remote and do something funny out in the world, and they'd film it and make these like 3-minute packages.
Yeah,
that would air like in the act 4 of an episode.
Yeah.
All the other writers, you were sort of like, everyone was a utility player, and everyone was just kind of you would get like really like talking through like the structure of your day as you show up and you're sort of there'd be a meeting in the morning where we just sort of like talk. We would like have FaceTime with each other and not like computer FaceTime, but like actual FaceTime. I should be clear. And we would just talk about like what's in the news and what are we going to do? Like what are the big assignments that are going to be coming up? It was sort of where like Tim and then Rodney and then the Stangles, like the head writer, would sort of like touch base with all the writers. Yep. And then we'd all go off to our, like the first thing, I think sometimes we would like, maybe we would, I think we would show up at the morning meetings with top 10 topics. That was the thing that you would show up with. And like, so what's the topic going to be? And everyone's read the newspaper and everyone's sort of like said like, oh, Mayor Giuliani did something funny, so maybe we'll do a top 10 about that. Or, you know,
was there ever consensus? People would come with the same thing, so you knew you were all on the same wavelength, or were they all original and different or fresh, or did it
they vary? Were I mean, I think this was especially at a time when you know, Craig and I had grown up on you know, the weird top 10 topics that were like, you know, top 10 numbers between 1 and 10, you know, things like that like we always loved. But and we still did those from time to time, but for the most part, there was a real push to make the top 10s topical and have them really reflect something going on in the news. And so that was always and so often people would show up and pitch the same thing, because, you know, if there's like one big news story, everyone sort of eventually gets around to the same take on it. But we would have that meeting, and I think we would even like settle on a topic. I think sometimes we would just like, and it was a time, you know, we usually, I think we still had to pitch things to Dave. And so Dave, maybe they would, I think maybe like the head writer would take like a few topics down to Dave and pitch them to Dave, and then one would get approved. When it would get approved, basically then we would all shuffle off to our offices, and we would the assignments for the day would arrive in the form of these Xeroxes. Like the head writer would say, okay, we got this topic approved, and he would say to the intern, tell the writers, you know, the topic is this, and we want a passive jokes due at 11 o'clock. And so you'd be sitting in your office just twiddling your thumbs, and then the intern would come by with a Xerox. Everything was a Xerox, and it was like that just said in big letters, just handwritten in big letters, you know, top 10 things Bill Clinton did on vacation, because maybe the story was like Bill Clinton's going on vacation.
And are you and Craig in an office receiving this memo back? Are you two in the same in speaking or in voice reach of each other, and you start bouncing off each other, or is this something that you would do in solitude at this point?
Craig and I were we were in the same office. We had two desks in the same office, so everyone had their own office, and everyone got the assignment with the topic and due by 11 a.m. I think Craig and I, you know, early on, I think we sort of like riffed together, and then eventually it became it's probably faster if we just like each write up our own. Like just sit there and write, and sometimes if one of us has an idea that's sort of half formed, but we can't figure out how to word it, we would like check with each other. But yeah, you would write them up and then print it out and put it in there was like, you know, all these different, like on the door. It's really like I'm unlocking my memory of this, but I'm glad we're talking about this, because I don't want to like forget how things used to work. Like on the door there were a bunch of different like kind of like slots, like folders to not folders, but I want to file things. Like I don't know what the word for it is.
like an inbox that sits on your door.
But there's like a bunch of different inboxes, and there'd be like one for top 10, the one for mailbag, one for remote ideas.
Oh, that's so cool. Do you have a picture of one of those? Do you have a picture of one from back in the day? Do you have a photograph of one of those? Like that is
I'll dig around and see if I can find it. But
that's cool. Anyway, yeah.
And that was the structure of your day, was like assignments come around on a Xerox, and it'll say, and so like the things that you could get assigned were like, you know, top 10s were the big one. The head of mailbag, Rodney at the time, and then us when we took over, would ask the writers for mailbag ideas, because that was something that mailbag was on Friday, but it was something we would compile through the week, and it was
Of
we were sort of
course.
like, it was kind of like the longer the stuff that took a little longer to like get together, because there would be like tape pieces that you'd have to shoot.
I was just going to say,
stuff.
especially if you had a remote or a T piece that went along with it. Which was often.
Yeah, and that took a little more work, and we you would get your assignment on a Xerox and sit down at your computer, write as much as you could, come up with as many jokes, and then print it out and drop it in the box and wait for your next assignment. Like that was kind of the structure of it. It was there would be like mailbag letters, there would be extras was a big thing, which is just like a funny thing that Dave can throw to, like a one joke bit that's more than just a joke, but like a little tape piece or something that he could throw to in the act one. We'd also would need act one ideas, and often like there would be things like know your current events was a thing. I think it was like every Thursday with know your current events, and so we would have to write those jokes, and then interspersed through the day also we would meet a lot in the writers' room for things like if there's like a Dave's video collection piece coming up, we would watch the clips from Dave's video collection and write funny jokes about them.
When Carter and I wrote for Late Show with David Letterman, we learned only after leaving there to Los Angeles and writing on a couple of sitcom staffs, we learned something that we didn't know because we were ridiculously young newbies on Letterman. On Letterman, and I'm sure other writers on the show have talked about this, a great thing is when you would pitch an idea for like a video piece, you were responsible for every beat of it. You had the idea, you wrote the script. If that script got approved, you were handed back the script with a little check on it. It said, great, we approved your little videotape skit or your mailbag letter, whatever it is. Go make this. Then what you did was you took the script and you talked to the director. You talked to everyone involved in production about what you needed for that shoot. You talked to Sue Hum in wardrobe. You talked to these sound effects people. You talked to music clearances. If you wanted a specific song, you had to clear that song to use it. And you went and you with the director kind of co-directed and shot the piece that you wrote. You were on set, you're working with the actor, you're working with the camera people, you're working with the director. You get that shot, you take that to the edit room, you order up the sound effects you need, you call up graphics, you call up Chiron, you say, I need this text, you say, I need this graphical element that needs to be created before I'm in the edit room, because if I'm in the edit room, I don't have that, I can't finish it. And you bring your music, you literally back in that day, because I was there 97, 02, we were bringing down CDs. We're like, okay, it's track 6, input this is the music we need. But then halfway through, it switches to this other music cut that's on this CD, and you had it and you uploaded those songs, and then you chose the parts of the songs you wanted. You sat with the editors, you put all of the graphics and the music and whatever together. Doing that for 4.5 years is what taught me how to be a TV showrunner.
This is the original page on blue paper, and you can see the boys. They were in case folks don't know watching, the boys, Jim Mulholland and Mike Barry, the head writers of Johnny Carson, head writers of the Emmys, the Oscars, the legendary comedy writers. And they were big contributors to the monologue. But they didn't have cell phones, only called over the regular phone, and they didn't use a computer. If you can see, this is a typewritten page.
Classic, old school, and signed on the bottom.
Fact, on the blue paper, and signed. So here's the story behind this. December 1997. So it was Dave did Christmas jokes, obviously, around the holidays. And there was a joke of mine about some Christmas special, some Kathy Lee special, some dumb joke. And then after that, and this was the tag, this is the kind of joke that Dave would do that's not from the boys. It's not even like a joke, just sort of a tag. He said, and then tomorrow, it was my show, Kathy Lee has a Christmas show tonight, whatever the joke was. And then the boys' joke is, and tomorrow night, Jerry Springer celebrates the holidays with 5 teen prostitutes. Right? So it's so Dave. Nobody else would say that, but it's hilarious. And so, but here's the thing. So I'm in rehearsal. We go through my joke, and we get to this joke, and Dave just doubles over at the waist. He used to do that sometime if he was laughing really hard, and just couldn't stop laughing. And I said, that is pretty funny, but like, I don't know if I've ever seen you laugh this hard. And he looks at me, he says, I just want to know how the boys came up with 5 teen prostitutes. How did they know? And so I call Mike Barry up on his landline, and I say, Mike, Dave just wants to know why 5 teen prostitutes. I'm telling you, it couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 minutes later when I hear beep, and this thing comes through. And I gave it to Dave afterward, and oh my God. So here's what they say. So he rewrote the line, tomorrow night, Jerry Springer celebrates the holidays with 5 teen prostitutes. Gabe, in answer to Dave's query as to how we came to pick 5 teen prostitutes, had we picked 4 or 16 prostitutes, the joke would have sounded like 14 prostitutes or 16 prostitutes, thus dulling its meaning and heavy laugh potential. 1 teen prostitute sounds like a strictly personal encounter, or at the least, a serious break in Springer's regular multi-low-life format. 2 or 3 teen prostitutes still seems a rather skimpy panel and not very funny. Yet, 7 or more teen prostitutes is too unwieldy a group for Jerry Springer to believably handle on a Christmas special and would undermine any credibility the joke might have with the audience. Thus, 5 teen prostitutes is the only possible number of teen prostitutes that works. The alternative would not to be the joke altogether, which in retrospect, I strongly recommend. I mean, brilliant, just brilliant. Everything you need to know about comedy is right there. That's how much, because people don't get, especially people starting out in stand-up, don't get how every single word, every number is considered.
Yes.
Every syllable, every letter. And I guarantee you that when the boys wrote that joke, they didn't think, 14, 16, sounds too much like 14 or 16, instantly just knew. But when they had to deconstruct it, they deconstructed it in perfect logic. I just think that's great.
And tomorrow night, Jerry Springer tomorrow night celebrates the holidays with 5 teen prostitutes, so that'll be good.
But, for me, I can't write this way. I have a very structured approach to it, but the structure is very Letterman. To this day, I write in his voice, and I can't shake it, man. I can't shake it. And I use this as an example of just, you were talking about the structure of a joke. Yep. So the typical structure of a monologue joke, and this is the key that I tell I don't mean to keep bringing up my students, but I have to, because
please do. No, bring them up by name, give them shout outs. I don't care.
I think about it.
Yeah.
I always say the biggest pitfall you can fall into, because most of my students are stand-up comics and some veteran stand-up comics, the worst thing you can do is try to think of a funny punchline. The best thing you can do is try to think of an association, something related in a completely bizarre and unusual way. When you find the perfect association, the joke writes itself. So the best example that I think I could give is, and I don't remember everybody's jokes, but a joke of mine that when Clinton got caught with Monica, he hired 2 spiritual advisors to come and pray with him in the White House. So I thought, well, this is a typical empty political gesture. And so I wanted to write a joke about it. So I knew it was going to be a Monica joke. So right away, I know where I'm going with it. So I thought, so this is the way a joke gets written. So now I go through this mental Rolodex of spiritual advisors. Okay, what do? They wear robes. Well, Monica had the blue dress with the stain. Maybe there's a tie-in, not really. The wine, the wafer, eating, mouth open. Maybe that could get to, what else? They pray, they're on their knees. Bam. There's the association. The joke is done. Yep. Now all I have to do is create the right framework and not use too many words. So the joke ended up being, President Clinton hired 2 spiritual advisors to come and pray with him in the White House, just so we need more people in the Oval Office on their knees. And you can see that once knees was there, it was just putting words in the right place, really. But so it was not trying to think of something funny necessarily. It was just, what do I associate with spiritual advisors? And that's really how 90% of them are written. And when the perfect, association comes out, so does a joke. And the other thing I just wanted to say quickly about that on their knees joke is the first way I wrote that joke was just so we need more people on their knees in the Oval Office, which would still get a laugh, but not as big a laugh as putting knees, the punch word, last.
Right.
So instead of in the Oval Office, in the Oval Office on their knees. And what's amazing is I see people that are late night writers that do this for years, and including myself, that will still make the same mistake.
You missed the simple thing, but the simple thing, but the key thing.
It's something that we should have flipped. Yeah.
You know what Clinton's done now? He's hired spiritual advisors. I have a staff of spiritual advisors. Paul, you've seen a staff of spiritual. Clinton has spiritual advisors, and they're going to get together with President Clinton once a week, and everybody's going to pray. And I'm saying, oh, great, that's just what we need: more people on their knees in the Oval Office. That's how this all started. How this whole thing began.
So the jokes really have to be much stronger for monologue than they do for stand-up, because you're taking the 50% of it out of it, you being able to sell it. So the joke has to read funny on paper the first time. So the first thing I kind of instinctively knew was to keep it short. Like I always tell my students, 3 lines or less on the page. And the one thing I see Dave do that I've never seen, and you just basically mentioned it, is he can stray from a 3-line joke and make it 20 or 30 seconds long, and he will hit that scripted punchline perfectly.
There you go.
He will find his way back and hit it perfectly. Other guys can't do it. No, and the other thing is Dave had a structure to his monologue, a story arc, which I've never seen another host, including Johnny Carson, have. He would find the closing joke, which the reason we went to Monica is a dirty joke is always going to get a bigger laugh on TV because it's forbidden on network. But everybody knew it was about a blowjob, So we would always close with a borderline blue joke, and so we would find that, and then that would be joke number 8, and then he would usually pair up joke 6 and 7. Like if one was about Clinton, maybe the next was about Gore, and then jokes 3 and 4, and then joke 1 and 2 was I was walking to work through Central Park today, saw a squirrel, and right away the idea of him walking to work through Central Park, people start giggling.
Oh yeah,
already.
I love when he talked about being on the subway. I thought
and
that
then
was
the next one
or
would
at
be
lunch.
about the cab drivers, but there was an arc to the monologue. No, every host is like every stand-up comic. Let's see what else is going on. You've never heard Dave do that.
So with Madonna, you have to understand she is the biggest star in the world at that point.
That's
and
right.
also fodder every single evening for David Letterman for jokes.
Yeah.
And because she keeps doing dumb shit and funny dumb shit, and it's there's an endless amount of jokes about her to the
Which
point
she
where
talked about. She brought a clip. Did you help her assemble the clip that she brought that night?
Yes, I did, because so here's what happened. So so yes, she, I think at a certain point realizes that she needs to probably go on the show because it's every night. And she has a publicist, a manager at the time. I can't remember. It's terrible. I can't remember her name. She was Cher's manager too. Yeah, it's bad. I can't remember. Anyway, she calls up and we start talking about the possibility of Madonna coming on.
Yeah.
And so she goes, okay, I want you to talk to Madonna about this. So I get on the phone. So Dave is apprehensive about this, and rightfully so.
Rightfully so, yes.
and I say, well, let me talk with her and see how this goes. And so I told her, I said, I have an idea of how to have a segment that will make you look good, that'll be funny, that Dave will be comfortable with and you'll be comfortable with, and we can diffuse some of this stuff a little bit too. And the idea was she can come on and basically say, I've seen all the jokes you've been making about me, and Dave will sort of say, I've been making jokes about you, or whatever he says, like I don't know what you're talking about. And then you say, well, I brought some clips, and you say, and there will be 3 pieces of tape, and put him on the spot and let him sort of answer to each one of them.
Let him be
right?
Dave. Yeah.
Right. So she likes that idea. So she agrees to the booking, and I go to Dave and the night of the show, and I'm like, I actually think this is going to go okay. I think this is going to be fine. And so he goes, okay. I go, there's 3 pieces of videotape. She's going to call for them. We'll be in and out, and then whatever else happens is fine. I go up to her dressing room, and she's with a famous makeup guy, Kevin Aucoin, and they appear to be stoned, but I don't want to say anything. I've never met her before.
You mentioned Indo on the show,
so right, I'll get to that too. Yes. So, anyway, yeah. No. So I they appear to be something's going on.
Okay. So
I go, hi, I'm Daniel, and she goes, and she puts it on her hand, and she goes, suck my dick, and I go, what? Like, I'm sort of smiling, like, I'm not. Did she just say suck my dick? And I go, okay. And she goes, suck my dick. And I'm like, and at that moment, I was like, oh, fuck. I think I'm in trouble. And I think there's a different agenda going on here, maybe. So I started my, radar goes off, and I'm like, oh boy, this might not go well. I really, at that exact moment. And so I tell her that it's 3 pieces of videotape, and she's like, that's too much for me to remember. And I'm like, it's not really too much. There's 3 pieces of video. You just call from one at a time, kind of thing. And she's like, and she says, well, we had a little endo. And I go, endo? And I didn't know what the fuck. I mean, I smoked pot, but I didn't know what endo or indo or what the fuck it was.
Sure.
And then she and Kevin started laughing, and I'm like, oh fuck, she's stoned. So it was like, and I was like, how do you get fucking stoned in this? Like, it's gonna be a seminal moment in television, right? And if you're nervous, smoking pot is not the fucking thing to do, right? Like, that's not it. Take a Valium. I mean, whatever. But you're and she's almost like, and go in, and she's like, can I swear on this show? And I go, well, they'll bleep you, but I guess you can swear, kind of thing. So I did tell her she could swear, and that's all she did. She went out there and she tried to give Letterman her panties, and she had a fucking agenda. She didn't call for the clips. And Letterman was not happy at all.
Oh, I've heard.
He was, and I was really, so here's the thing. It was 2 things. I was frustrated because I'd sort of presented it to Dave in a way that everything is going to be great, and it fucking was not great.
Yeah.
At the same time, I knew this was seminal television, no matter what happened.
Absolutely.
So
famous or infamous, people were going to be talking about it, right? Famous or infamous,
right? And the other part of this was that doesn't get talked about is that she wouldn't leave. She wouldn't get off the set.
The poor damn Counting Crows. The poor Counting Crows, right?
The Counting Crows were making their national television debut that night.
Yes.
And we'd already bumped, I think we bumped somebody else in the middle, but maybe not. But anyway, we were about to have to bump the Counting Crows. She wouldn't leave. We kept trying to say goodbye to her on the air. And Morty said to me, because I stood next to Morty during the segment, get rid of her. I'm like, how am I supposed to get rid of her? Like, you just got to get rid of her, because otherwise we're going to have to bump the Counting Crows. So I went up to her and just sort of like hung out for a moment, like awkwardly, like a segment producer does. And Dave's sort of like not really talking to her. And she starts in there and I was like, wave to the audience, Madonna. And she waves like this. And I put out my hand, and she takes my hand, and I lift her out of the chair, and I go, wave again. And I literally escort her off the stage.
Holy shit.
And there's a picture of that moment, which I can send to you later if you want.
Yeah.
Because it's me pushing her, because the CBS photographer took the picture of the moment. Me kind of escorting her on the stage, and Dave laughing his ass off because he just saw when I'm dragging her off the stage. I'll send you the picture. It's a great picture. The way I always viewed these segment notes and the pre-interviews that I did was that they were a safety net for Dave in terms of if everything goes south and he doesn't have anything to talk to anybody about, they're there. And frequently, we'd be able to get some stuff that was interesting that he wanted to talk about, but there were also times when he just, went off and didn't, or times like with Madonna where he couldn't go through what was in the segment. And then that was those were the moments where Dave was at his best, I think. And, if you look at this sort of, I remember TV Guide put together their sort of for Letterman Goodbye, their top 10 moments of Dave, as everybody did. I remember also looking at them and thinking, okay, 8 out of 10 of these were unscripted. 8 out of 10 of these were moments born out of spontaneous need.
Bingo.
And Dave's wit. So, it's interesting. We can all do what we do, but really, like, you live and die by your host.
Yep.
And somebody who can be quick and funny like that. So, yeah.
Letterman was a big fan. He used to watch the old Jack Benny shows.
Yeah.
And Jack Benny used to have a running gag. He had a singer named Dennis Day. And he had his announcer was Don, I forget his last name, Jesus Christ. Don, heavyset guy, I forget his name.
Okay.
They would do
Giller will probably feed it to us in a second.
They would do a bit where Don would burst into the studio and say to Jack, we just had a flat tire and Dennis has to rehearse his song. Can we rehearse it here? So Letterman heard that on the Jack Benny show, and we directly lifted it. And it would be Tony Randall knocking on the door, coming in, and Dave, I just had a flat tire and Mandy has a gig and we got to rehearse the song. He goes, can we rehearse it here? And Letterman goes, well, I guess, just like Jack Benny. Wow. And Paul would have the charts and Paul would play, and we took such great care. I remember Letterman saying, we got to get a song. And he used this term that will blow the fucking roof off the place.
Yes.
He goes, it has to be a song that is just so powerful that it blows the roof off the place.
Yep.
And so Paul would always build to it. And then Mandy would belt out this fucking song that would stop the show. It would just, people would jump to their feet. Just crazy. They'd jump to their feet. And then it would be, okay, bye, thanks, Dave. And they'd run out and Dave would be like, well, like, look at him, he just stole the show from me.
Yep.
He just did the high point of the show. How can I follow that? And that's how good Letterman was, that he knew to play that moment, and he knew that he could recover. It was great.
Don Wilson, by the way, was the announcer.
Don Wilson, yes. Thanks, Don.
Thanks.
By the way, the Drew Barrymore thing, it's funny. I will preface it only by saying it was a different time. And
of course, yes.
And
yes.
And I think there's some context that's needed there, because it wasn't just me browbeating a 19-year-old innocent girl to flash David Letterman.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that at all. And what had happened was, do you want me to tell that story? Are you going to go through a bunch?
Oh, no. Hey, no, please tell the story. Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So with Drew, there was this place in Tribeca, and I lived downtown New York, called Blue Angel. And it was really a unique place in that it wasn't a strip club. It was sort of a cabaret. And then like Parsons art school students would take their clothes off in nuns outfits to Frank Zappa songs and dip candle wax on their naked bodies, kind of things. And then there would be cabaret acts and jokes and things like that.
Yep.
And Demi Moore, who was researching Striptease, this movie she was in, had told me about it. And I told Letterman about it, and I'd gone, So anyway, So I think I can tell this story. So Letterman one day, I told him about it. I'd been one night, and it had been really like being in Paris and seeing something that you don't see anywhere else.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I said, I'm going to go this Friday, and if you want to come along, you're welcome to. Now, I meant that in sort of the way that Dave, didn't go to the White House. He never went anywhere, but he lived down in Tribeca, and so maybe it wasn't completely impossible.
Sure.
And I think that he was curious to see what the hell was going on in this place. And so he said, yeah, sure, I'll go with you.
Yep.
And I thought he was kidding. And he said, I'll see you Friday at 8. I'll meet you at the bar, Embassy Bar, which my buddy, one of my great friends, owned this bar, and it was right around the corner from his house. So I went to the bar on the off chance, and he wasn't there, and I left. And I knew, I was like, this, what is stupid? Of course he's not going to go to this. And so he said that he went to the bar and was swarmed by people because he never goes out anywhere. It was David Letterman walking into a bar basically.
Yeah.
And then he said he retreated and went home. And so Lori Diamond left messages on my answer machine going, hey, Dave's looking for you, but like it was before cell phones. So anyway, I went back in. This leads into the Drew Barrymore story a little bit. So Drew is coming on the show, and what's interesting is the day before she comes on, she goes to this place, Blue Angel. And Drew, being the free spirit that she is, gets completely naked on the stage and has the time of her life. And it's the front page of the New York Post, but nobody had cameras, nobody had phone cameras. It was just a big story. Yep. And to her credit, she didn't cancel the show because everyone wants to talk to her about this insane moment where she takes all of her clothes at the strip club.
Sure.
And I'd produced her before, and she got on the phone with me. And this is before publicists listened in on everything. And she says, Dan, it was the most liberating experience of my life. I've never felt freer. I've never been, never felt better. Anything like that. And I loved every second of it. And I said, I've been there. It's a great thing. I tried to get Dave to go one night. He got I tried to talk him into it. He kind of half-heartedly decided, but he never made it. And she's like, oh my God, he would love it. And basically, talking about her, and I go, well, it's his birthday. Maybe we could give him a little performance kind of thing of his own. And she's like, oh my, and now that's the part that's inappropriate on my part. I should never have said anything even resembling that. So she said, do you think he would like something like that? I was like, are you kidding? He doesn't get out. He would love something like that. She's like, well, how could we ever do that? I mean, it would be really fun to do. So I said, well, truthfully, if you flashed him, you're back with the audience, nobody else would sing. And she's like, okay, I'm not sure I want to do this, but let me think about it. I got to work out my courage, but it would be really fun. And why don't you can't tell anybody. You can't tell Dave. You can't tell anyone. It's going to have to be a surprise. And not only is it going to be a surprise, but I might not do it,
Sure.
So just tell Paul to be ready with some vampy music for me if I need it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I told Paul. So then I go and see Morty. And Morty was such a chicken shit at this moment.
Morty was mortified? I've been wanting to say that sentence forever. Was Morty mortified?
Yeah, Morty mortified. Yeah. No, so what happened was I said to Morty, I go, I got this thing where you can't tell Dave and you can't tell anybody. But I know Dave. I mean, Dave is, pretty, he doesn't like this kind of stuff. And I knew I wasn't going to lose my job because I figured, I was okay with that stuff. And I said, what do you think? And he goes, it's your call. And I go, it's not my call. You're the executive producer. It's your call. He goes, your call, Danny. He walks away from me. I'm like, fucking shit. So I was like, okay, great. So I was like, fuck it. Let's try it out. I saw Drew, went through the segment with her, and said, they're ready to go if you want to do it. And that's how it happened.
It was Dave's birthday, I guess. And she didn't tell anyone she was going to do this. And she climbed up on his desk, and turned her back to the audience and lifted her shirt as a gift to Dave. And people just went wild, and everyone in the control room was just howling. I mean, it was just one of those crazy, crazy moments that people couldn't believe.
And something, the fucking Academy made such a to-do about Dave bringing Tom Hanks up to do the stupid Patrick and roll out the red carpet. Hanks could care less. Hanks is the most chill guy you've ever met. It was like he knew he was going to win. He didn't embarrass the awards. No. He didn't smirch their legacy. He was, doing what he did. If they didn't know that that's what he was going to do, they shouldn't have hired him.
Right.
It wasn't his fault. And I kind of felt bad because Gil Cates, who did the show, I was very close to his brother, Joe Cates. So I knew Gil. And right before the awards, Letterman wanted to fuck with him. And he said to me, Morty, I want you to go to Gil Cates and tell him that I'm not going to wear a tuxedo, that I want to do the show in a suit. And I said, Dave, what do you want to do that for? I said, the guy's doing a show that 1 billion people watch, the biggest show ever. I said, a half hour before the show, you want to just fuck with him like that? He goes, yeah, let's do it. Let's just. So I felt badly. So I went up to Kate's. I said, Gil, you got to take this with a grain of salt. Letterman wanted me to tell you that he's going to wear a suit, not a tuxedo tonight. And Gil goes, yeah, all right, don't worry. He got it instantly, and it was just one of those things that you go, oh God, why do you have to fuck with people?
So here's what happened with Peter O'Toole. He was a great guest. He'd been on Letterman any number of times, and he was always, great. But I mean, there becomes a challenge for a segment producer too when somebody comes on 100 times. Mm-hmm. There are only so many stories you can, you're really like, wringing the washcloth there a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so, there'd be times with like guys like Tom Brokaw who'd been on every time we was a guest.
Yep.
And so, I remember as a researcher calling Yankton, South Dakota after reading his book, trying to find new stories in the book when most of the stories we'd heard. And there was a big thing about repeating stories. You didn't do that. And even if they were talked about on other shows, you couldn't repeat stories. That was part of the goal too. So I'd call Yankton, South Dakota, and I found his school teacher and I found his neighbor, and like they tell me stories, and Tom was always like, how did you find that out? And like, it was sort of a cool thing for me. So Peter O'Toole was a challenge. So when I said to Peter O'Toole on the phone, and I had not produced him before, I don't think I'd ever produced him before, because these shows for us in London are a big deal. So here's what I'm thinking. Either you come out on a rope, like in My Favorite Year, like you make an entrance that way, or you come out on a camel, like Lawrence of Arabia. And so Peter O'Toole, being, I don't know, in his 60s at this point, maybe late 60s, said, I am not coming out on a rope, and I most certainly will not be coming out on a camel. And I said, oh, please, these are such big shows for us. It would mean so much. And, and I was begging him, and, shamelessly begging him. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you find in London a racing camel, a real racing camel, I'll do it. But short of that, I'm not going to do it. And I go, okay, that's fair. I appreciate that. Mark my words. I'm going to find a racing camel. So we're in London. I'm looking everywhere for a fucking racing camel. I can't find a zoo camel. I can't find anything. I can't find any camel at all. But I find this guy, and he claims to have a racing camel. I was like, God damn it! I knew it. Like we were doggedly looking forever, and we found it. So got very excited. Brought in the camel. And Peter O'Toole shows up at the studios, Channel 4 studios, and we have the elephant doors, the garage doors. That's where the camel is. And I meet him at his car, and I walk him to the loading dock, and I go, ta-da, racing camel. And he goes, and he like turns up his nose. He goes, that is not a racing camel. That is a common zoo camel. I'm like, no, that's a racing camel. He's like, no, it is not. Like, so like, and I'm like, oh no. And I think I spent like $5,000 or something to get this fucking stupid camel there. And I had to get like approvals and a bunch of things. And like, oh, please, you still have to do it. Can you please come out on this? He's like, no, I'm not coming out. And I'm like, I'm going to lose my job. You have to make this entrance on this. And so he's like, he felt bad for me, I think, and he agreed to sort of do it, and he was sort of reluctant. And he goes, okay, well, we'll try it out in rehearsal kind of thing. And so then the part that's sort of a cool add-on to the story is that we were doing Stupid Petricks that night. And I was pissed at the guy who'd sold me on the idea that this was a racing camel, and he was there with his camel.
Yep.
And I was pissed because I'd been fucking had and spent all this money on it kind of thing. Yep. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this thing is salvageable. Does this camel do any tricks at all? Does it smile? Will it shake your hand? Does it wave its tail? Anything? He's like, nope, sorry, son, doesn't do any of that. Sorry. And the guy who's with them says, enjoys a bit of lager every now and then, the camel does. I go, what? He's like, yeah, enjoys a bit of lager every now and then. I go, the camel drinks beer? He goes, yes. I go, great. So I got an oil can of Heineken or something like that for Peter O'Toole. And as he dismounts the camel, after we did the rehearsal and everything, he says, I have what you call a stupid pet trick. And he opens it. And we haven't done this with the camel also. Maybe the camel was like, no. Camel takes the can, holds it up, and chugs the whole thing. And the audience goes crazy, right? It was on the cover of this British lad magazine called Loaded. It was on the cover of the magazine the next month. The camel with the can. Yeah, it was like and then Peter O'Toole, of course. It just it makes him. It adds to the legend status of Peter O'Toole. He comes 100%. In on the camel, and the camel drinks the beer, and it was a celebratory moment, and it was a great moment for me as a producer as well.
Larger than life moment.
I'm probably forgetting 100 details, but that's what I remember.
Wendell was a nice man.
Yeah.
And then God rest his soul. He was a very nice man. He had a very nice family. He had a lovely wife, a lovely daughter. He had a son. And he was a good guy, but he was one of the old school, old chummy guys who, used to go to the New York Athletic Club, which, I never liked because it was an anti-Semitic club, supposedly.
Yeah.
So, he would steal pies. He'd come back to the office and he'd have this gigantic pecan pie. And he goes, I took this from the club. You want it? I said, sure, I don't care. I like pecan pie. And he'd bring pies and he'd bring things and he used to steal them from the kitchen at the club.
Yeah.
So when we took over at CBS, we owned the show.
Yes.
It was our show. So every penny of it was from our pocketbook. And the more money that we had to put out, the less money we made.
Yep.
Less money we had to do the show, the less money we had to travel, the less money, we were on a tight budget. It was a good budget. And Wendell used to go into the storeroom and you'd see him walking out with a case of bottled water. The Evian water, but in a 24 pack.
Yep.
But Bill, where are you going? Oh, I'm just going to take this home. No, it's NBC. No, CBS doesn't pay for it. We pay for it.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. And then after he did it repeatedly, it was one of the chits on Wendell's record. He was a well-meaning guy. He loved the show. He always wanted to do more, and we never let him.
Yeah.
He didn't have the comedic ability that Alan Kalter ended up having.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
To this day, I regret the fact that we fired him, and it hurt him, and it hurt his family, I think. And I don't think he worked very much after that, and then he retired and passed away. And I still bear that, and it makes me sad. But
Alan was the consummate professional. He was hilarious. He was such a pro. It was like he would just nail it every time. He was so good, and he was game for almost anything. There were a couple times he's like, I don't know about this, Jeremy, because I would bring him a script and he's like, I don't know. But then he was always such a good sport, and he would end up doing stuff.
I would write, some sketches for Alan, and the thing that jumps out about Alan is going back to the thing I said earlier about, Biff is who he is and Rupert is who he is. And the show, to its credit, had a very kind of amateur hour quality to it. We weren't slick professionals, which was great and charming in its way. Sometimes as a writer, it was a little frustrating that, you couldn't give a big soliloquy to Rupert, He
would love that, by the way.
but I would say that except for Alan.
Yeah.
Anything you threw at Alan, he could do it. He would elevate it. He would make it better. And he was such a gift to the writing staff. I just loved his talent and being able to give him a script and have him make it 5 times better.
Celebrity Interview, that was you, right?
Yeah. I didn't create it. I believe Carter and Craig created it, and I think they did one. It might have been the Gwyneth Paltrow one. Paltrow. Oh no. And then she. I think they just. That's around the time they left the show. And so I think the head writers at the time, Eric and Justin, who had hired me, I think they said, "Can you do the next one?" And that just turned into this, we did it to the very end. So I did take that over, and it did grow a little bit, which was fun. I mean, it largely was the same thing. I mean, like anything, we really sort of like drove it into the ground. But I mean, God, Alan, rest his soul. Yep. It was, he was so fantastic. So that was just, that was all him. I mean, like the piece did grow a little bit. We added little embellishments here and there. Really, it was just to make it longer because Alan was so good at it. And Dave enjoyed it. You could always hear Bill Sheff cackling with laughter. Whenever, if you watch them on YouTube, and Alan says, "Oh, you make me sick because you did this and you did that," and Dave said, "That's not how it happened," and Alan would say, "That is exactly how it happened." You could always at that moment hear Bill Sheff cackle with laughter. And my favorite moment, I don't know why, was Alan would say to Dave, "You got a pencil?" And Dave would say, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, then mark this down, asshole." Yep. And every time Dave would laugh. And I remember one time Eric and Justin said, "I think we should lose that line." And I said, "You can't lose that line. Lose anything else." But that was, one fight I won. And they said, "You're right. Leave it back in because it makes Dave laugh." But that's a perfect example. I'm not laughing. Those are not jokes, really. I mean, maybe mark it down, asshole is, but it was just more that, I don't know, it was the way Alan delivered it. There was just, I don't know. It's never the joke that comes head on that makes us laugh. No. It's always that very odd, specific thing, that odd sort of round of the way kind of thing that, that's a perfect example. Like the actual jokes where, Alan insults Dave and then he insults the celebrity. Those were great, but it was those little things that I really we found entertaining, and which is why we did it for whatever it was, 15 years.
Let's come up with a new act 4 for Alan. And of course Alan was great. Alan was probably the strongest pure performer on the show, in that, unlike all of us stooges, he could really sell something. Whereas we're all just doing our deadpan thing, and he is fearless. Yep. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a while, probably in the early 2000s, where they would have him act out old scenes from Fred McMurray movies, because I think Dave decided that Alan, at least in black and white, bore some sort of resemblance to Fred McMurray. You'd see him doing these old film noir things. It's like, he's really good at this. I always heard it, that Alan's character, as we knew it, was more or less created by Carter Bays and Craig Thomas, who preceded me by a few years, that they sort of invented the whole creepy Alan, weird pervert Alan kind of thing that became an endless source of amusement for all of us. Yes. And then when they left, I think Lee and Jeremy kind of picked up the mantle and really became the strongest writers for his bits. Like Lee was the one who came up with the Alan Kalter celebrity interview. That was his format, and it was a great piece that we did so many times and always just killed. And it had the benefit of seeing his guest reacting to the awkwardness. There were a few times when, I guess, I don't know if Lee was busy or if he wasn't there that day or something. A few times the Stengels asked me to write one of those. So I wrote like maybe 3 or 4 of those, which I was very happy to do. But I'm sure if you watch them, they come off as sort of like a weird off-brand version of it. Like it was maybe made in a different country and translated into a language, then translated back,
Which is hilarious in itself, by the way.
Yeah, so I did the RC Cola version of the Alan Kalter 7 interview. It tastes kind of like the real thing, but it's a little bit off. And I did a few. I thought they were okay, but I'm sure if you asked Lee, he would say, he meant well, but it's my bit. So I always felt a little guilty about that. Lee's a great guy. I love Lee. I still work with him, actually. But like I did one later on in this show. It was actually it was Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman. Were both on the show that night. So I guess they decided, well, this is a great opportunity to do one of these celebrity interview things. And I don't know if Lee was busy or whatever, so they asked me to write it, and I did my best to sort of follow Lee's template and try to do things that wouldn't do any disservice to what he'd created. And I thought it went pretty well. It ended up getting cut from the show. I heard someone say it was a little bit too mean. So
to Alan, or Alan was being too mean?
No. That Alan might have been being too mean to the guests.
Oh, to the guests. Okay.
Nero and Hoffman. Like I don't know. The footage does exist out there online, I believe.
Yeah.
From rehearsal or something, and I thought it was pretty good. The one line I remember, because it's Dave complaining. Sorry, it's Alan complaining that Dave stole Alan's thunder.
Yeah.
Alan spent weeks trying to book his guest for the celebrity interview, and who does Dave have on tonight right before Alan? The same guests. So it's Alan yelling at Dave for, oh, I've just watched you sucking up to these guys for 20 minutes. Oh, look at this. And the one line I wrote for that I thought I liked is, talking about Dave sucking up to Dustin Hoffman. Oh, it's so disgusting. If I want to see a senior citizen jerk off Dustin Hoffman, I'll watch The Graduate. So I thought that was a pretty good line.
I think we did it at least once. It was like, Alan Kalter makes your company's product sound sexy. Just some weird thing like that. He really was, and I don't know if they fully understood this when they hired him. He was another ultra powerful secret weapon for the show, in the same way Paul Schaefer turned out to be the perfect foil and balance for Dave. And we lucked out again and again. Like Rupert, he was right there. I don't know if there was only a few interactions that Dave would regularly have with people. One was Jack Hanna, and other times if it was Dave talking to Rupert.
Mm-hmm.
But my comedy damaged mind would be set free from its shackles, and I would just roar with laughter at what was happening with Dave talking to Rupert. And he just happened to be there in that deli when we moved there, and he was just this charming, good-hearted guy who would just nod and sort of look rueful or placid or whatever, and just what a bizarre, wonderful chemistry that was with him.
The Alan Kalter Punch-Out pieces, where we that started as one, we just needed a funny payoff letter, which is what we called the fourth letter in the mailbag, where you thought you could go out on a big laugh on something that was a little punchy. This is literally punchy. Alan gets insulted by a viewer who writes in. He says to Dave, hey, where was that person located? And they say it's, Mike Chisholm in Vancouver. Are you in Vancouver? Is that where you live?
Just outside Vancouver. Yeah, 3 hours away from Vancouver. Yeah.
They say it's Mike Chisholm outside of Vancouver. Yeah, and hey, Dave, where was that letter written from? Oh, it's Mike Chisholm in Vancouver. Alan says, great, thanks. He leaves the theater. And then there's this intentionally long pre-taped piece of Alan like walking out, getting a cab. He goes
making the trek.
Making the trek, and he finds Mike Chisholm and he punches him out. And it's exactly what you think is going to happen. There's no twist. The twist is there's no twist. And then he comes back, and now, a minute and a half of network airtime has been wasted watching Alan go punch out a guy that insulted him. And there's no twist to it. And we did Dave enjoyed this. Dave liked those pieces. You find that Dave, for whatever reason, he liked how dumb it is. He liked that there was no twist. But then over time, we did it over and over again, and there started being little twists, like Alan wound up punching out Regis Philbin.
Yeah.
Wound up punching out, I think at one point he punches out, I believe, himself in some incredibly sophisticated split screen technology. If I'm not mistaken, that happened once, unless I'm inventing that. But there was just like an elaborate series of these. And just like, where else but a 5 nights a week show could you just sort of find a way to drag out and belabor something like that? I loved doing that. I love that the old late night show would do that, and there were pieces that kind of could come back and evolve, and characters, Chris Elliott, the guy under the seats, you'd be watching and you would hope that these recurring bits, there'd be a new installment of some recurring bit. That idea of having the real estate across time on a TV show to find ways for these ideas to evolve, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in a movie. No. It doesn't, and a lot of sitcoms, it didn't happen. But when you have, that was the great like playground of a late night show and late show and late night with David Letterman, because it was this thing where there was 5 shows a week and you could just try stuff because of that. And it was sort of this big canvas that you could paint on, and you couldn't do weird stuff every single night. but there was enough real estate to sneak in these weird, subversive, bizarre ideas, and every now and again those ideas kind of, one of them popped and it transcended, and it felt like it spoke to people, and then you could find ways to bring those back and play with them. And there was not those were all of my favorite things, when we could like build those out and find character. Alan Kalter, I felt like we found Alan Kalter as a character. We would write so many these elaborate, florid, crazy speeches for him. And bizarre pre-taped pieces. Like, he was a singing duo with his twin brother.
Oh, that was so good. Oh my God, that was
Alan
so good.
Kalter for the ladies. We would, any chance we could have Alan either give a huge long monologue live there on the stage, or could spin him out into a pre-tape piece. Anything we did with Pat and Kenny over time, sometimes Tony Mendez. I
was going to ask about Tony Mendez, if you had any Tony Mendez memories.
And finding ways to kind of like find those characters. Tony Mendez was like this like hothead firecracker and would freak out and storm off, and like finding ways to sort of like define those characters. Alan's character,
Sue, like when Sue would come on and berate Dave. Oh my God.
Yeah. And like, I think those are my favorite things. And when I connect it to the rest of my career, I'm like, I think it's because those were like hints of character development. I know it's funny to say that about these little late Late Show bits, but there's a sense you were finding Alan's character, you're finding Pat and Kenny, what they were good at, what their comedic strengths were. And those are actually the same things you need to carry into a sitcom, as you find out what those actors' superpowers are and call them out, and have the sort of time and space to do that over years and seasons is a gift. And I think that's a real crossover between that launch of my career on Late Show and like How I Met Your Mother, for example.
Those are the people I find funniest in general. People who can make you laugh by not saying a joke, not saying a punchline. Like, Chris Elliott to me was maybe the best I've ever seen. Like, I feel like, stepping away from the show, I feel that way with, Amy Poehler. Melissa McCarthy can do it. Bill Murray can do it. But Alan was so great at it.
Yeah.
And then we would write scripts just because we wanted to to see Alan perform. I always loved that I was just talking about this with Joe, that I loved that we had a cast of characters, not just 2 or 3 people. We had like 10, 12, 15 people. And it's so funny that I don't know why. I mean, this might be the stupidest comparison you've ever heard, but it just like a couple of weeks ago, it made me realize that we were kind of like the Muppet Show, in that our show was not the show. Our show was, like when Dave would say, sometimes we'd write things about, the celebrity is in his dressing room, and we cut to that. Or, I just got a message, cut to the receptionist. Our show, we were also showing, or pretending to show, how the show was produced. We were showing Scooter backstage with Kermit. And like that to me is what made the show so fun, is how much we made believe took place backstage, like the cold open of Dave with George Clooney, or Dave with Tina Fey. And, that to me was such a fun, it's what made the show so fun to write for. Is that it didn't have to be Dave. We could show it Harold Larkin. I've shot a ton of pieces with Harold Larkin, and let me tell you, he really is. People would ask that question a lot of times, like about the different people we would have on the show, like George Clark and Harold Larkin. And I'd say, no, Harold Larkin really is our head carpenter. Harold is a brilliant performer. I mean, to the point where it used to surprise me. Like we would go on field shoots, and I would talk into a mic into his ear, and I would always try to wait until he stopped talking. He'd say, "No, you could." He was like a news anchor. He'd say, "No, talk to me while I'm talking. I can do it." And I'd be feeding him lines as he's having a conversation, and he wouldn't miss a beat. I never knew how he got so good at it, but he really was a natural. Harold was the easiest person I ever shot with, but it was. That really is what I loved as a person who was helping put the show on. But I also loved, just now as a fan, that I love that kind of, that's what the show was. That yes, this is Dave. Like Dave was almost playing the part, of a guy hosting a show that was terribly run, even though it wasn't, obviously.
The only reason we lost dominance was because we got fucked in prime time and didn't get any lead-ins. And we started going older, and it was Matlock and this one and that one. And, you know, all of a sudden it wasn't the audience that we were craving. And you know, they had must-see TV, and they did younger shows, and they had Friends, and they had this and they had that. You know, something, that's how we lost. It wasn't about the quality of our show and his show. It just so happened that it coincided with Hugh Grant's appearance on the show, on the Tonight Show. And that happened because Hugh's publicist, you know, he was a desirable guest, whether he was caught with hookers or not. He was a pretty big get. So they would be, out of fairness, and the publicists would, you know, they were very fair. They would alternate. One movie, Letterman would get him first. One movie, Leno would get him first. So that movie, just by luck of the draw, Leno got Hugh Grant first and got him the night that after he was caught. So, you know, that was the spark plug that brought on the defeat. But
but you call it a defeat.
It wasn't because people watched it and liked Leno. It was because people happened to have watched it, and it was about the time when the season was changing. And
you
know,
they came to him and said, "Look, Dave hates that we're #1 Jay Leno billboard, as he should, and he wants to have his own billboard. Great, let's do a billboard, okay? And he wants to say we're #3." I went, "You got to be kidding me!" I mean, you know, my instinctive reaction was, "Are you crazy?" And then I went, "You are crazy. That is great. That's going to get more." And so we bought a bigger billboard down the street, so you could see the Jay Leno #1 and the Dave smiling, shit-eating grin. We're #3. And you know what? God bless him. No, the best, I got to tell you, again, seriously, we were happy conduits of his great humor and ideas. Not all of them got through, but most of them, like this one, did.
I gotta ask. You just opened the door. Do you remember one that didn't get approved that they threw out there saying, "Hey, let's do this," and you guys are like, "No, that's too far." Do you remember one off the top of your head?
No.
Okay.
I don't. I just remember we would go kind of like, really? And you know, they would go back, we would go back. Somehow we made,
and there'd be a compromise.
Yeah, but not often. Look, as I said, Dave's a genius, and his work was genius, and it was true to brand. He wasn't going to be told, or you know, he wasn't going to read a script. You know, he was going to make it what he felt was his brand of comedy, and we were true to that. It's the audience who have to respond, not Dave.
That may have been the funniest thing the show ever did.
It's so good.
I've heard, I'm not positive, I think that may have been Rob Burnett's idea. I was not there, I've just heard about it, but just seeing that picture, it really encapsulated everything about Dave and what made him, in my estimation, so much better than Leno, who was a very talented comedian.
Yes, of
but
course.
Dave was just someone who had this other something else you couldn't identify that just made him really special.
Ovitz and I hatched a plan. And the plan was, what if Disney buys Worldwide Pants? And if Disney buys Worldwide Pants and our library and our assets and our commitments from CBS, Everybody Loves Raymond, we hadn't done the pilot yet. If Disney buys all that, one, they pay a fortune for it. Two, Michael Ovitz and David Letterman would be partners, and he'd be back in business with Ovitz.
Holy shit, Morty! I've never heard this. That's amazing. Why didn't it happen?
At the time, Letterman, and this is how I surmise it happened. I think there were other factors in my getting fired, but I had always kind of put two and two together, where there were people that when Ovitz left, they ascended to be the point person for Letterman.
Okay.
Lee Gabler and Jim Jackway, who was Letterman's attorney, and Fred Nigro, his business manager.
Okay.
And I don't think they wanted Ovitz back in Letterman's life. So when they caught wind of this secret proposal that Ovitz and I wrote, they turned against me. And I think they convinced Letterman to turn against me, that I was out for myself, I was out for the money, whatever it was. But I became very close. So when I got fired, the night that I got fired, I went back into my office and I called Ovitz, who was at Disney. And I said, I can't believe I just got fired. He goes, good. He goes, you'll come here. You'll be the Lorne Michaels of Disney, of ABC, blah, 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 blah. I'll give you a deal. Simultaneously, he was negotiating with my girlfriend at the time, who was Jamie Tarsis, and she became the president of entertainment at ABC. So he couldn't give me a deal because it looked like she was giving me the deal, which she wasn't. Ovitz gave me a deal there. So I had to wait like a year before I got a deal. But Ovitz had promised me and took very good care of me. And when Ovitz was at the on the outs there, I'll never forget going up to seeing him, to see him at the Disney headquarters. And he was in this gigantic office. He had not a paper on his desk. And he broke down crying. And he said, I don't know what to do here, Morty. What the fuck do I do? He goes, they call this building the Team Disney building. There's no teamwork in this company. I mean, he's sobbing. And I go, Michael, you're better than all this. Don't blah, 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 you know, trying to placate him. And he goes, Morty, you're the only one that knows I have a sense of humor. You and Dave know that I'm funny and that I can have fun. I'm not serious. And it was a very interesting conversation. And shortly thereafter, he left. Funny story, the night I got fired, Mandy Patinkin was a guest on the show. And Mandy, I was friendly with Mandy. So he calls me up that afternoon and he goes, Morty, I have an idea. He said, I want to do some magic tricks for Dave. He goes, you know, I have 4 or 5. He goes, I don't have anything to talk about. He goes, I really want to do these magic tricks for him. I've really done them well, and I think he'll enjoy it. So I said, all right, let me talk to him about it. I go to Letterman, and I'm sure in his mind, he knew he had to fire me that night. It was the night I got fired. So Letterman says, I say to Letterman, I said, Mandy wants to do magic tricks. What do you think of that? He goes, no. He goes, what am I supposed to do? Act surprised when he does a magic trick? I have to fake being surprised. That's why he hated getting gifts on the show.
Right.
Never liked to be surprised with a gift because he'd have to feign appreciation. He had to feign that he likes it, whatever it is. So he goes, I know all these tricks. He goes, what am I going to do? I go, wow, I'm amazed. He goes, I don't want to have to act and react that way. So I go to Mandy, and Mandy goes, well, I have nothing else, Morty. I have to do these tricks. So finally I convinced Letterman. I said, let him do the fucking tricks. What's the big deal, right? I'm getting a prop. Hold on. So one of the tricks he wants to do is where he goes behind Letterman's head, right? And now Letterman had a thing with his neck. Letterman claimed that he had a broken neck.
Yes.
Claimed that, you know, he was in a car accident, whatever it was, and that he broke his neck. So Mandy had this trick where he would get behind Letterman and he'd go,
oh boy.
And it wasn't supposed to squeak. It's a dog toy with a water bottle. So he had a water bottle under his arm and he'd go, no, not supposed to squeak.
No, I hear it. No, we hear it.
Need a water bottle.
Yep.
So it sounded like cracking his neck.
Yep.
So everybody like goes, oh, he touched Letterman's neck. Oh my God. And Letterman looks at me, you know, gives me the around the camera look. And I knew he was pissed. So after the show, he calls me into his office and he fires me. Now, I, of course, think it's because I let him touch. I said, David, he goes, it's not about that. He goes, we want to make a change, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So that was, so anyway, I go back to
Mandy.
So I go back to my office and the phone rings and it's Mandy and I had just gotten fired. And he goes, Morty, is Dave pissed off? I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. I go, Mandy, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I got to go. I'll call.
Yeah.
So I rushed him off the phone, didn't tell him I got fired. And years later, he says to me, he goes, you got fired that night. He goes, did I have anything? I go, no, Mandy, you didn't, blah, blah, blah. So it was funny. I get fired from the Letterman show.
Yeah.
And part of my exit deal was that they were going to give me an office for a year at Black Rock, the CBS headquarters. And I was on like the 32nd floor.
Yeah.
And they used to call it the bad boys floor because anybody that got fired and had an exit deal, they would give an office on that floor. So Eric Ober, who was fired as the president of CBS News, he was on that floor. I was on that floor. And it was the bad boys floor. So, they gave me an assistant. They paid for my assistant. They gave me a beautiful office overlooking 6th Avenue, big view.
Wow.
For a year. I didn't have much to do. I was kind of, looking to figure out what I was going to do for a career. And so I used to have lunch every day at the China Grill, which was in the lobby of the CBS building.
Yep.
So one day I'm having lunch there and I see Cosby and Moonves together having lunch. And I would be there with magazines, reading and eating alone. And I had to pass them to get out of the restaurant. So, of course, I pass them and say hello. And Cosby goes, in front of Moonves, he says this. He goes, I can't believe you got fired from that show. He goes, you were the heart and soul of that program. He goes, you were the Papa Bear. You were the conscience of that show. He goes, I will never do that show again now that you're gone. And I was like, Bill, that's so sweet of you. Thank you. And in front of Moonves, and Moonves is, oh, wow, Moonves is even impressed. So
in the moment, yeah,
I'm like flying high thinking, what a great thing. That night I get home, watch the Letterman show, put it on. Tonight, Bill Cosby.
Yep.
He was on that night. He taped it at 5:30 right after lunch. He promised he's never going to do the show again. So I knew Bill Cosby was a liar from that day on.
There was a certain amount of Kremlinology of what has the great leader said and what are the implications, and what might have been just a irritated, tossed off remark is now enshrined as some sort of inviolable rule.
Yeah.
And then later, no, I don't. I don't hate that. I don't know where you got that idea. And you wouldn't remember why it started. Yeah. So you do your best to try to understand an ever evolving ecosystem of rules and preferences, and at some point you found that, oh, but this contradicts that. Well, that's the nature of the game. Just like every day the mood may be different, and the show evolves and the world evolves, and now we're going to talk about this, and we're going to find our own way to put an imprint on something like after 9/11, the classic dilemma of, oh my God, the world has changed. How does comedy fit into this very different feeling world? And the very tentative ways that Dave tried to test, do we want to laugh? Do we think we should laugh at silly things? And are we still fully human beings that have all these impulses, not only grief, but optimism and laughter? And yes, we found our way slowly back to that.
We were writing materials because you had to, but yeah, it was a day-to-day finding your footing. The first thing that jumps to mind talking about this, and I don't even know if this is true, but like I seem to remember just like the analogy I gave about cramming for a test when you come in the morning, and you tear through the newspapers. It was very strange in that during that period you would come in and you would tear through the newspapers and it would be nothing but news you couldn't joke about. And so I remember us, before I was talking about how the balance between topical humor and evergreen humor, I remember during that period, it was just like, you couldn't make topical jokes because it was just grim. And like, I remember it's just like, I think at one point, like doing a top 10 list about the Jolly Green Giant, just because it was silly and it won't hurt anyone's feelings or make people cry. So I remember that being an odd time. I was not a huge fan of George W. Bush, even in the days after 9/11. So I kind of very quickly wanted to get back on and making jokes about the administration, criticizing the administration. Dave was kind of wary about that. Like, we need to hang back. And
But
so,
carefully, yeah.
yeah. And so that went, in my memory, it went a couple months. And then I remember there was a weekend in, I want to say December or January, where the president had bruises. He had abrasions on his face. And it was it was because the president choked on a pretzel and fell down and hit his head on a table and bruised his cheek. And
Thank you, God.
I remember
it's fine again.
At that point, Dave kind of nodded and went, "Yeah, okay, I guess we can make fun of this guy again." Like, I think Superman has lost his cape.
And then it was, I had to take 2 weeks off, which was kind of unprecedented. We didn't take much time off if we could help. But I was going to get to be in the Blues Brothers movie sequel. And I had to go and shoot it for 2 weeks. They liked everything the same, you know, so I was trying to figure out who am I going to get for 2 whole weeks. And it was our talent coordinator at the time was Sheila Rogers, who suggested, what about Warren? Oh my goodness, the one guy that Dave would be happy to look at and see, you know, if I wasn't going to be there. So Warren was able to do it. He started doing covers like we always do. He came in with various things written out, like a Spice Girls arrangement written out on score paper. I said, Warren, what, you know. Anyway, that's another story.
We work faster than that. Yeah.
Actually, Dave, you know, I'd like to hear Warren's songs when he does it. So when he would do it, it would be all his songs.
Yeah.
Actually, for bumpers, for play-ons, everything. Nice of him to be able to do it. And certainly that last show, What Can You Say? That was real television. He sang 3 songs.
Yeah.
Which was hard on anybody to rehearse 3 and then do them right away at the air show. But he, you know, this man was absolutely dying, and it was amazing.
So let me paint the picture. We are, you know, he was supposed to do the show, John McCain. It was a big get. You know, he was a friend of the show.
Running for president, but it was on the show.
It was a big booking, right?
Yep.
And there was a big financial crisis going on at the time, and he used that as I won't say an excuse. It was like, okay, I got to get back to Washington because he was still senator. We got to vote on this thing. So
suspending his campaign.
No one questioned it. And the show went to their go-to guy, the modern day Tony Randall go-to, oh my God, we need a warm body in the scene. It was Keith Olbermann. Keith always delivered. It was great. Yep. So Keith is there. To paint the picture in the control room, I'm on the back deck. I've got like a very Get Smart type office phone, not a shoe phone, but like a 60s. It's a beige phone with the lines, very officey, right?
Yep.
And it was to my left were the 2 CBS technical guys. One of the 2 would be there. You have to make sure everything's okay with because wasn't the technical guy, so they were the technical liaison. Me, Shecky, Kathy Mavrakakis, Paula, another producer, and Jude on the end, right? So we're in the back deck. I'm sitting there, and right behind Jerry, all right, Jerry Foley, our incredible director, and monitors. Yeah, people know what a control room looks like, and monitors, and it's all the different feeds. But because we were CBS, we had access to feeds at the broadcast center.
Absolutely.
So the broadcast center,
yeah,
we were on 53rd and Broadway. The broadcast center is on 57th and like 10th Avenue, 10th and 11th Avenue.
That's Black Rock? Is that what it's called?
No. Black Rock was on 52nd. That's where my office was. The
Gotcha.
broadcast center was an old milk factory, believe it or not, 2 levels. And it took up the whole block between 10th and 11th Avenue. And that's where 60 Minutes happened and the morning show and Katie Couric, the evening news, right? And occasionally we would get those feeds that were coming in.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there watching Keith Olbermann, and we'll be back with more Keith after this. And there's a murmur going on, and I don't understand what's going on because they're talking on walkie-talkies. Yeah, we're gonna punch it in. Hold on one second. And then I look at the screen and I see Katie Couric is interviewing John McCain. I'm thinking this has got to be a fucking tape. This can't be happening now. oh my God. So I know what they want to do. I applaud what they want to do, right? I think it's brilliant, but holy shit, you can't just do that without me just making one phone call, not to stop it, but to say this is happening, because
a heads up has to happen.
By doing this, our feed is out there too. And if Dave's picking his nose or someone's doing something silly, that what's to stop one of the other CBS shows for taking that footage? It just becomes really ugly. But this, I think that was a great idea. So I hear them say they were about to take it. Someone tell Dave, da da da. I said, hold on, wait a second, right? And then I'm getting like pushback, right? And Jude and I go outside the control room to have this conversation. And I said, what I just told you, it's not going to happen. We're going to do this, but I have to call Leslie. I have to give him a heads up that, this amazing TV is going to happen. So getting back to what I said earlier, as far as managing my Leslie, I would never say, Leslie, what do you think we should do? That's not fair to him. He's not in the moment. So it's literally, I get under my deck, because that's the only phone that I had, on that crappy little phone. And I'm whispering, it's like, McCain was supposed to be on the show. He canceled the last minute because he said he had to go back to Washington. But it turns out he's on Katie Couric right now. Dave's got the feed. We're about to put it up. It's going to be incredible TV. All right. I just want to give you a heads up. Okay, kiddo, great. Thanks. Boom. And then boom, it happens. It happens. And it happened at a time where somehow it got picked up. I think we put it out because there was always that window of time where as technology started to get wider, where you could actually have a website that might actually have streaming video. Because we went through, in 96, it wasn't there. And by I want to say 2004, whenever this was, it was, I think we might have even given something to Entertainment Tonight. Like we were feeding it because it was gold. Because Dave was, what he did with that was amazing, right? I remember my wife calling me and going, what is happening over there? Are you okay? Because I'm seeing this all over the news. I'm like, you have no idea. But
that was one of the greatest moments. It was one of the greatest moments.
It was great. And then the great thing is, weeks later, however it was, McCain coming on, and the road to the White House goes right here, right through here. Yeah, and
what happened there? I screwed up. That little it was so good. And like you said,
the thing about Dave, he's so forgiving the minute people have the nerve to show up, right? I think he did it with Hillary too. There was a lot of badgering of Hillary.
Yep.
I think she shows up on the show she finally did was the night he went in for open heart surgery too, by the way. That was like another crazy night.
Oh, that's crazy.
The day before. Yeah. Oh my God, this is like an acid trip.
Once we got the ear monitors, and we could speak to each other unbeknownst to anyone else in the world, game on. And the musicians every musician I've ever met is pretty much someone who could have had a calling as a comedian also. And just the jokes cracked constantly during the show. I mean, it's nonstop. It is nonstop. The things that I'm hearing in my ears, saying in other people's ears. Yeah, that went on constantly, Mike. Constantly.
Yeah, speaking of On the Edge,
yes, sir.
So we're on the show one day, and Dave's doing the monologue, and this was my 15 seconds. Dave's doing the monologue, and he says a guy in Kansas City got arrested yesterday for having sex
never
with a
have done
cash
this,
machine.
but Tom Malone mentioned about the guy having sex
I
with
whispered
the,
to Paul on the
machine.
intercom. I said
he came
he
into
wanted
some
to come
money.
into money. and so Paul stops the show. Dave, my trombone player has a better punchline, and he gives him a punchline. And the show stopped for like 2 minutes, and Dave's like, "Where were you at the meeting?"
Oh my God!
But the band has to write some material.
Quite literally. Now they're writing the comedy too.
Where the hell were you
Kim
an hour ago?
and Don Giller, take note to this moment and throw it out there, please. Get it out there right now.
Don Giller has documented so much about the show. He'd be a good guy to interview.
Don. Hey, Don is eternally grateful for everything that Don does behind the scenes with us and the fact checking and all of the ideas and everything. This episode is
him as well too. Very intelligent guy.
I'll give you a great Schaefer-ism that we took advantage of the microphone by having the microphone that nobody else could hear but us.
Yes.
So first of all, Schaefer, I don't know how he did it, man. He must have been some kind of, he had 12 minds going at once because he had the AD talking in his ear at all times. He had Dave to respond to. He had what was Dave was, when Dave wasn't talking to him, to respond to the room itself, and just to set up the band, and also to be a bad motherfucker on the keyboards, which he has always been, right?
Yes.
Genius on the keyboards and everything. I don't know what, just the brain and listening to people make mistakes and, making notes while we were making the mistakes and everything.
Yep.
But one of the great advantages of that microphone that he was so genius about never talking into the wrong one of, that's the genius. Because that could have been pretty interesting.
Yep.
His father was a really great guy, and Bernie Schaefer, and he had this uncanny ability, according to Paul, to call out somebody's wig, hairpiece, black spray paint on the bald spot, those kind of things.
It's a hell of a gift.
And yes, he could nail it every time. And I think Paul inherited that gene as well.
Oh.
So he would point out, when certain people would come on, he would point out one of those, it's a weave, it's a thing, plugs. He would just, and we would just go, really? And then the more you look, the more you realize, man, he nailed it so fast, So that was one of the great uses of the microphone.
Well,
he's coming. He'll be back.
First of all the credit goes to segment producer Maria Pope, who is working now for Jimmy Fallon. But just in the spirit of, by now we were totally into doing play-ons and making little secret points. And Maria was into it. And Marv Albert had a sort of some unfavorable publicity whereby someone had pulled off his hair really, and said in the press, I pulled off his wig.
Yep.
And he said, it's not a wig, it's a weave. So Maria Pope said, when he comes out, why don't you play Green Weave? And that was a no-brainer. Of course I'm going to do that.
And sometimes there was some judicious, is it barrel rolling, back scratching, gerrymandering?
Sure.
Like some PA that was, some PA who was just about forced to move back to Iowa because they couldn't pay the rent. So we'd cast him in a couple of bits over a 2-week period, and they would earn enough with the under five, $200 here, $600 there. But Paul Schaefer, they would play music in and out of the breaks, bumper music, and when some musician was in a tough spot or needed dough, he would play their music. I can think of many examples, but the one that comes to my mind was Sly, from Sly and the Family Stone. Yes, and which was great music to play anyway.
Sure.
But Paul would go out of his way just to sort of like, without, in a legitimate way, help out a fellow professional and an artist, And
I love hearing that.
Yeah, that was a great thing. All unsung and all unacknowledged.
The whole spirit in which the show existed was that, it wasn't necessarily for everyone, it was, that's why you felt like you were in a club, so that's why, I think there were things that people loved and hated the quiz machine, even within our own staff, so I mean, So
no, that was universal.
There were probably people who hated the Weekend Late Show on the staff, and
Dave liked
it. Dave loved it, and Dave Dave particularly liked it when I don't know how many episodes in it was when it took the turn where Bruce says something that I think Bruce says the kids are with their mom this weekend in one of the sort of like in one of the what sounds like an ad lib back and forth. And Dave just loved the fact that like this sort of B story was coming out between, we were just hearing about Bruce's marital problems in the promo for their D-level weekend show. So anyway, I don't know. I'm laughing because again, when something tickles,
because it was funny.
Dave,
it was great.
Well, but you also everybody will say this, but when you make Dave laugh about something, it's everything you want. So that was very satisfying when he found that funny.
Well, the one thing that sort of became our consistent way to contribute to the show was, I don't know if you remember Dr. Phil's words of wisdom that that went on every night, basically for, I'd say, at least a year.
Oh yeah, you guys drove that one well.
Yeah, and Dave just kept wanting to do them.
They're great.
Yeah, and it was so like they were so easy to find, but Gabe and I had to watch every episode. Yeah, that was us, and we pitched it originally, I think, as as part of like a new for fall thing, or things that the show was going to be changing. Yep. And it was just supposed to be like a one-off thing that every once in a while we would hear a little bit of Dr. Phil's words of wisdom. But I remember distinctly like knowing that Dave had his whole Oprah thing, and the Oprah log of her not calling and all of that, which I think was Carter and Craig's also. But knowing that Dr. Phil was coming out of the Oprah world, and I'd seen like, oh, this guy from the Oprah show is going to have his own show now. That is definitely going to have something that we can use for Dave, that it's going to fit into Dave's world somehow. And so then it was just a matter of like, how do we use it? So I remember recording, on my TiVo, the first Dr. Phil show, and like, okay, let's see what we can work with here.
And there's a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot, but just narrowing in on that way to use his, and he just, set himself up for it time and time again. Like anytime he would sort of, whenever
any metaphor or simile that he gave.
And totally. And he like takes their, speaks in the persona of the person, like I'm just a big dumb idiot or whatever. Like
I've had a vasectomy,
giving us those,
and I've had it reversed.
Yeah, it meant that we had to watch every single episode of Dr. Phil, and that became a regular assignment for us. And we would switch off who was doing it on a given day, but it was more like scanning through and fast forwarding anytime anyone else was speaking, and then it's like, okay, here we go. Like Dr. Phil's going to talk again. I want to be Miss America. Yeah, I remember it was a big deal when Dr. Phil was going to be coming on the show for the first time after we'd been making fun of him for so long.
Yep.
And I don't think we knew at that point that he had such a great sense of humor about himself. But it was like, this will be interesting to see how it goes. And he quoted some jokes and stuff, when he was on the show, so it was nice to see that he was playing along. But you're right, it was it ended up becoming more than just those bits. But the great thing for us was that, like, in one way, it was like nice to know that we were going to have something on the show every night, just about. Sometimes there were two of them in a night. The downside was like it was very much a formula, and like you said, he was beating it into the ground, and it was like, okay, maybe it's not always as great as coming up with something new.
That's
and
a very
it was fun
cool
also
thing.
to see like that the audience after a while started to know it too, and so when he'd introduce it, people would start to, it was just written as a one-off. And I remember, the Stengels came to us and said like, okay, we're going to need more of those. Like, get ready to watch more Dr. Phil. So they would, Randy and her gang would send us the tape every day of the Dr. Phil show. We'd scan through it.
For me, I did a lot of traveling, right? So I would go and help be like sort of the field producer for like Biff Henderson's America segments, right?
Yeah.
So like I would go, it would be like a director who would go, and it would either be Randy Grossack or Jessica Santini, and a writer would go, and Biff would go. But I was just learning on the job at the time. So for example, you see Biff driving that Winnebago all the time, but that's only when the camera's rolling. When the camera's not rolling, Jeremy's driving the Winnebago, right? So, when we were the first time I ever did it, I think it was like Calhoun, Missouri, and I was driving the Winnebago. Or actually, I think it was the first time I was driving this very big Winnebago. I backed it right into a ditch, like within 10 minutes of driving it. You know what I mean? It was ridiculous. Yeah. And then you're driving and you're responsible for getting the whole crew in the Winnebago to the location. So here's another example. We did a Biff Henderson's America I was thinking about this the other day. It was in Whiting, Maine, right? And I was talking, it was Chris Harris was the writer, and they wanted to do a joke. It was, the joke was Biff is going to go on a lobster vessel. He's going to go on a lobster boat. He's going to pull up a lobster trap, and in the trap is going to be an AOL CD because those were everywhere at the time. Okay. And then the joke was going to be, oh God, these things are everywhere, right? Yep. So this is my first time doing this sort of thing. So I'm like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call a authentic lobsterman. I'm going to set this up. We're going to go out with a lobster vessel. We're going to put the CD in the thing, and we're going to shoot the joke, right? Yep. So I call the guy. He goes, awesome. We'll take you out on the boat. You have to meet us at 3:30 in the morning, and we'll be back by sundown because they're going to go out lobster fishing all day. And that was the first time I realized, I realized, wait a second. I got to think this through. I got to figure out, what does it mean to produce this joke? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so, I stopped down, thought about it for a second. I called a lobster restaurant in the nearby town. And I just said to the guy, you don't happen to have a boat that could take us? He's like, of course. So within 20 minutes, we were on the guy's boat in the harbor. He put the CD in a trap and dropped it. So it wasn't as organic and natural. Do you know what I mean? But it was one of those things I was learning to produce the comedy on the fly and saving us 12 hours on a boat for one joke. Do you know what I mean?
I might be wrong about this, but I bet you if you ask most of the writers the same question, again, I could be way, way off on this. The thing that we most remember or we're most fond of is probably the oddest, stupidest, silliest.
Of course it is.
Instead of like, this one big piece that I did that was, 4 minutes and this and that. And
no.
Like when I'm together with Joe and Steve, the things that we kind of joke about or the things that we remember most fondly really just entertained us. I'm sorry I'm giving such a disappointing answer. Like I can't remember one specific thing. I mean, like for instance, Joe's gonna love this. On Friday, Joe and I watched a clip that I wrote along with Jeremy Weiner, where NASA had developed this urine purification system so that astronauts could turn their own urine into potable water. And so Jeremy and I wrote this thing where Dave says, and look, we have footage of the test in action. And Joe plays an astronaut, and there's a big machine that says, I think, urine purification system or something. And he drinks this big glass, and then he picks up a plug, and he says, forgot to plug it in, still urine. Now, it's as stupid as you could imagine, but for some reason, like something like that, I remember with great fondness. And I know Joe does, I believe Jeremy does.
Yeah.
It's not that it was the funniest thing I ever did. It certainly wasn't, or the most memorable, but it's moments like that. And I think it's because, the one great thing about that job was we always tried to make Dave laugh and the people in the room laugh more than the audience.
Yeah.
I'm sure Dave probably wouldn't be thrilled to know that, like, we didn't care if the audience laughed, because I know he did. I would assume he did. He's the one who's got to sit in front of 400 people just staring at him. But if I could make Steve laugh when we were having dinner, I was, thrilled. Or if Steve made me laugh. Also keep in mind at the Late Show, probably in all places, but at Late Show, these things happened as a throw-off. As a throwaway. Like Jeremy and I were writing something, and I really don't remember what Joe's first thing was, and we just said, what if we get Joe to do it? That's it. That's it. And then there's always like this, you don't know how it's going to go. You don't know if how well the performer's going to do. You don't know how well the piece does. You don't know how well Dave's going to respond to it. I mean, there's a number of moving pieces that could, kill something quickly. But I think once you see Dave enjoying it, it's like, well, let's get Joe to do it again. And then it always worked. And, but, for me, I just feel like I'm very much the everyman. Whereas I'm not saying Joe is not an everyman, but I'm just saying he certainly does. It's easier to do an impression of Joe than it is to do of me. It's Joe brought something special. He really did. I mean, he'll probably roll his eyes at that, but it's true. It really was. He was always very good.
I'm happy to talk about every appearance I did and whatever things, and I know you're very effusive in your praise of the writers and everyone else involved in the show. But I have to say, I can't really take credit for much of any of that. I don't think all of my appearances, I think, were written by other people. I never wrote myself into the show.
Yep.
I wasn't like, Lucy saying, hey, put me in the show, make me a star.
No.
So it's like the other writers sensed from the beginning, oh, this is a person who's not very comfortable with attention. So therefore, what we have to do is give him the attention that will create some sort of a awkward magic. But, Dave always liked having staffers on rather than actors playing characters. So anytime you could turn the staffer into a character, that was helpful. And especially if it was someone who you could tell wasn't really entirely comfortable being on the air. I mean, Rupert G, he's a smart, friendly guy, but you can tell he's not exactly, Mr. He's not super telegenic and like, let's entertain America. He's like, he's trying to sell sandwiches, and here comes a camera into the deli. He'll be friendly, but like, you can tell he's not dying to be a star. And Biff and Pat Farmer and going back to the old shows, Al Marr or Larry Bud Melman, he was an actor, but just barely an actor. And the thing that they all have in common is they kind of probably don't belong on camera.
Right.
They're not super photogenic. They're not super charismatic. They don't have any discernible talent. So of course it's going to be fun for Dave to put them on there and see if he can kind of milk some awkward energy out of them. So I was very, very pleased to be one of those people who the show latched onto in that way. I never expected it or imagined it would happen, but the other writers were very kind enough to try experimenting with me like that.
Like before the show, I remember there's one story I've told a couple of times, but before the show, Calvert had to go to the restroom, and this was in the year 2000. So it was the guests that night were Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Al Gore, I think, because it was election season.
Wow.
So it was a weird night there because Secret Service is all over the place. There's bomb sniffing dogs. There's, this iconic band rehearsing, and Calvert. He has to go to the bathroom, which is right across from the sound effects booth under the stage.
Yep.
So I take him from the alley under the stage to the bathroom. I'm waiting outside the door. I think I'm making small talk with like Gary Caffell, who's the sound effects guy, who did all the glass crash sounds and everything.
Yep.
Next thing I know, 4 Secret Service agents come down the hallway and sort of push me aside. And then I see Al Gore, who goes right into the bathroom while Calvert's in the bathroom. And all I hear is Calvert scream. And I just see Al Gore walk back out. And I'm just standing there like, what just happened? Like, Calvert, I just didn't lock the door, and someone told Al Gore the bathroom's right across from sound effects.
Let me tell you a very funny Tony Mendez story.
Please.
This might be a little inside, but what the hell? I go into Dave's office one day. He said, guess who just called me? I said, I have no idea. He goes, Vice President Al Gore. I said, really? Yeah. He goes, yeah. He said, Dave, how many times have I been on the show? I said, well, a few times, Mr. Vice President. He said, okay, I'd like you to do me a favor. I'm teaching a class at Columbia, and I'd like you to come and talk to answer questions from the students. And they said, yeah, sure. So he talked about it, thought about it, and he called Al Gore back and said, "Can I bring some of my people with me?" And Al Gore said, "Sure." He said, "And I'm thinking about bringing Tony Mendez, who's my Q card guy, and he's a Cuban exile. He's a refugee. His family fled Cuba, and he would like to come in full battle fatigues, like Fidel Castro. Is that a problem?" And he said, "Yeah, you probably shouldn't do that, Dave. Yeah, that's okay." So anyway, we went and did it. It was fine.
You went and did it?
Not with, well, we were up there with Dave.
Oh, not with the fatigues, though. Tony didn't come dressed like that. Okay.
No, it was me. I guess it was me and Bill Sheft and a couple of, who else? Staff members, maybe Mary Barkley, maybe Joanne, I don't remember. But anyway, I do remember this. One of Al Gore's staff members was with us, and it was Al and Dave were way up ahead, and he turns to us and says, "From this point on, I think we should probably refer to our bosses by code names." And then he said, "My boss's code name is," and it was something like Gargantua or something, who knows, something silly. And I thought, we're on a goddamn Ivy League campus in New York City. Why would I didn't say, I just thought, no, that's all right. Code names. What is this, playing some kind of game?
That way that he could tilt reality 22 degrees and it sounds plausible, but it's completely not right. Like one of my favorite tiny things.
Yeah.
That I have quoted to friends over the years. I don't know what year this would have been, mid-90s, I guess, based on when the movie came out. He was talking about that movie Speed.
Yes.
And his capsule description of the movie Speed was that it was about a talking bus that goes nuts.
Really? Takes people on some kind of crazy...
Which seems like, I don't think that's right, but it almost sounds plausible.
Yeah, I looked up to Steve Young as, man, if I could ever be a third as all around funny and useful and good in any situation as Steve is, then I'll be fine, because he was such as a writer who'd been there for a long time but hadn't lost a step or never felt like he was going to start to run out of ideas, which is just breathtaking to me.
You talked to Steve Young, right? You said?
Oh, a couple of times, absolutely.
Yeah, Steve.
Love Steve.
Steve, like the writers sometimes are my best friends, and sometimes they created massive headaches. Like he pitched, we do a Civil War reenactment on 53rd Street, right? With two, you have two different sides. You have, different guns. They were going to fire a cannon, right? And so it was Jill found the people, and it was one of those things I had to help wrangle them all that day.
Yeah.
And Jack Hanna was on the show that night, and he brought a water buffalo, but the water buffalo couldn't be near the cannon, so we had to move the water buffalo around the corner. And then in rehearsal, we didn't shoot the big cannon because they didn't want to waste the, ammunition or whatever.
Sure.
And but then the actors they didn't want to pretend to die because they were on TV and they wanted to be on TV as much as possible. But the whole point of a Civil War reenactment is some people have to get shot, and it was just insane. And then we did it on the show.
From the mind of Steve Young. Let's make
from the mind of Steve Young. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Steve Young. And then I remember during the show, just everyone is shooting their rifles or muskets or whatever, and then the cannon goes off, and it's just insane, and it reverberates throughout the entire neighborhood. And then it got so smoky with this. It was just, I saw a lot of crazy stuff.
The writer, because we're a late night show.
Yeah,
we come on after the average viewer has consumed a fair amount of news. So, you could say one of our mission statements, or our mission statement, is to kind of give the comedic spin on something they've seen in the news. Well, some days there's just really no news.
Slow news day.
And that used to turn into kind of the most fun day. And we always still talk about, it was a Wednesday and Steve Young, and it was just a brutally slow news day. I mean, look, I yearn for a slow news day now, and Steve Young wrote this whole piece about Hump Day. It made no sense. I mean, it made sense, but it was just that we're putting on a 30-second or however long piece about it being Hump Day. And it was like such a great performance by Steve. It's like, what could I do? How do I turn a nothing into something?
Yeah.
That is what I remember most fondly. It's, there's a joke about whatever, about Clinton, about Bush, about whatever. But, to be able to just create your own premise, which is the hardest thing, and create something out of whole cloth. And Steve was always so good at it. That's what I remember so clearly.
That was one of those things, like Steve Young was always the best at coming up with, the random thing that seems so obvious, but it's so funny. Like one day we were, it was like a random middle of the week and we had nothing for a comedy segment, and he ended up just pitching a commercial about Hump Day, and it was different questions about people and humps, and it was just one of those random funny things about, it was just a commercial for Hump Day because it was the middle of the week and we had nothing else to talk about and there's nothing topical, you know what I mean? Just people would come up with, and people could have the way he approached things from such a unique, skewed point of view was just awesome. And a lot of times, Lee and Steve and Joe, they could just come up with something so clever and unique that bailed us out of jams time and again.
You learned, if you found your way there, to trust. Like in the writer's room, I've heard of terrible writer's rooms where everyone is paranoid, everyone is scratching for credit. If I win, you lose, so I must win and you must lose. There's, I think, no shortage of rooms full of
sharks
people like that.
Shark
As I
Tank.
said, talented but not necessarily beloved people who populate certain branches of the industry. But we were lucky with a very long-term stable core of people who were comfortable enough with each other to say, I have the beginning of something, but I don't know where it goes, or I have this phrase and it may be stupid, but I'm just going to throw it out there. People would make themselves vulnerable on a daily basis in the writer's room and say, whatever this is in my mind, I don't have it. You're going to have to help me. And maybe together we can make something that neither of us could have made apart. So on a good day, that would be like somebody else pitches the beginning of something that I couldn't have thought of, but then I add the detail that make, oh my God, now it's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
Two people together in a room like that or more. We did things on a collaborative basis sometimes that were just everybody helping. But that took confidence that you believe these people are not rooting against you.
It's trust. It becomes a trust issue.
Yes, you want to do well, you want to be funny, you have that ego, and you want to keep proving that you're worth the paycheck. So if a long time goes by and you're not getting anything on, that's not good. But you're also feeling like if Tom Ruprecht or Joe Grossman has the best idea today and the show is great tonight, well, we've all won. We know it'll be my turn next time or next week or whatever. And not all shows get to that sort of collective trust. And there's all these other ways things can go wrong along the way. Production bottlenecks and some news story flares up in mid-afternoon. You have to rewrite the whole show to be about that and throw away this other good stuff that you were excited about. So yeah, you just learn to trust people, hopefully, if it's a good place like that, and not agonize about what did get on. Hopefully over the long haul, you'll have some Hall of Fame pieces you'll be glad about, that they beat the odds and got on and were triumphant. Like one I remember is just one of these silly ideas. It was fairly late, and I think I did write a song for it. It was just, like a little music bit would start. Oh, you know what that song means, folks? It's time for my grape break. And there was a grape break song, and a grape lowered on a filament from the catwalk down to Dave. And the way I wrote it, it was just going to be like in a little box, and he would open the box and eat one grape, and it would be just a lot of effort for something nonsensical. But Dave kind of got a hold of it and said, oh, you know what? Put the grape on like a sewing needle. And then he did this long thing where he's trying to get the grape in his mouth, and you see shots of that stagehand with the fishing pole with the grape on it, and it was such good humored chaos because Dave was in the right mood that day and said, "This is going to be stupid fun," and I couldn't have predicted how it would turn out. Some days, yeah, Dave would take something that you thought was this level and make it way up to here.
Yeah.
Just decided to run with it.
We also did MacArthur Park with Jimmy Webb on piano.
Yep.
Willie singing lead and playing bass at the same time on camera. So I got to write that whole big giant orchestra for that, French horn, strings, brass, woodwinds.
Will, that's like that's such a famous performance in itself. I can't really say that that's part of a group of things that happen like that. That was very special, very special. And Will was just awesome.
He was so good.
Oh my God. And he's playing while he's singing that, which is, oh my man.
And blocking. He's moving around. He ends up on top of the cake. Like
he had to end up on top of the cake and then hit that high, long note at the end. I mean, he was just, man, I have to give him his props. Will Lee is so major. He is so wicked. He is such a genius and so gifted, such a badass, and maybe he gets the best guy award.
I had to wear a device in my pants for to get that high note. Anyway, seriously though, it was a harrowing experience because first of all, you're playing and you're singing at the same time. So you got to like figure out you got to fake out some kind of way to coordinate those two things and to either like pay attention to one or the other to not screw up the whole orchestra, So you screw up one and that's going to throw everything off, and you screw the other one and it's going to throw everything else off, So you got the bass playing, you got the singing. And I had written out like a hybrid kind of chart for myself to appear on the teleprompter.
Oh, no shit.
It kind of let me know, it was a lyric thing, but it also had like some hints about what to play,
Oh,
and it was
fascinating.
Weird. I have it somewhere. I don't even know. It had just enough information for me to be able to pull this thing off. But the physicality part of it, I had my vocal coach there. I was kind of bummed because when I sing on stage, I have enough breaks in between phrases that I can just go to clear my throat if I need to. Not when you have the Madonna mic on. When you have the Britney Spears mic on, every sound is heard. So
it's a different animal. Yep.
And I did tons of Prilosec, tons of down a few gallons of water. My vocal coach had warmed me up all day long, and we had the basic band, without the strings and extra hired, percussionists, horns, et cetera. Jimmy Webb had a rehearsal one night because we were learning bumper tunes.
Okay.
And Letterman had sort of said, could you guys try to do MacArthur Park as a bumper, right? I believe this is how it went. Paul Schaefer,
bumper. Okay.
Paul Schaefer, who's really more on the inside, will know more about the exact way it went down. But to my knowledge, from what I've heard, we were rehearsing it at the bumper rehearsal, and we. I think Schaefer got the sense that I could sing it pretty okay, and maybe he went back to Dave and said, this, we don't know exactly how to treat this as a bumper because it's such an epic piece of music.
Yeah. Where do you start? Where do you end?
But it's got the potential to sound pretty good, And I think he talked Dave and Dave said, well, let's do it as a feature or something like this. That my order of events is maybe way off, but when that means, Paul negotiating for, can we get strings and can we build it up and do a thing? Can we get a prop? Can we do a cake thing? And whatever meetings went into all that stuff.
Right.
And the funny thing was, I'm friends with Jimmy Webb. He's a really wonderful human being and a good friend. And I was excited when when I got the call to say Dave wants to do this as a feature, and I even had a date that I knew that it was going to be, and I was able to call Jimmy, and say, look, just want to let you know that I've been asked to do this, your song, it's this MacArthur Park thing, and I don't want you to miss it. You know, are you going to be anywhere near a TV set on blah, 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 whatever the date was? I think it was like in July-ish or something.
How cool is that? That's awesome.
Whatever it was going to be. He got like really emotional about this. And he said, man, yeah, because at this point, it had been announced that the show was going to be ending at a certain place at a certain time or whatever. It was known that the show was going to go away. And that's what he got emotional about. He said, man, I'm going to miss this show so much. I watch it every night, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then a light bulb went over my head. And I just thought, wait a minute, I got to see something. Are you going to be in New York at that time? You know? And he said, well, I'm just coming off a tour. Yeah, I'll be in town. I'll be around, you know, when that's happening. And I said, you know, let me call you back in a couple of minutes. And I went over, and to my memory, and I think Schaefer had already had this idea, but I think it's my idea. But I went to those guys and I said, can we ask Jimmy, can we invite him to do this with us, you know? And which, because everybody said yes, including Jimmy, it was like the saving grace for me that day and night of doing that, because I have to tell you that he was so into it that he was like a little kid. He was so nervous. He had to play that intro, that harpsichord intro that he hadn't played since the actual recording with Richard Harris. He hadn't played that since that time. And I think he felt a great deal of like pressure and responsibility to get that right. So he was just like, I was chilling him out, which cooled me out, which really gave me the freedom to go ahead and just do it, you know?
Yeah.
You know, in between breaks, I could see how nervous he was. And I'd be, hey man, it's going to be great, you know? And I'm over there like,
yeah, who's telling you it's going to be great?
I needed one of those in my ear, but instead I was Jimmy's guy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of MacArthur Park on the Letterman.
That's right.
Only that it was different.
Mm-hmm.
Like once we knew that we were doing our final shows, it felt different. Even though we did the show the exact same way, it just felt, I just remembered that it just felt different. Like and I think we all felt so grateful. Yeah, we were grateful to David and to Paul and to the universe and to each other. You know, we really felt, that's what I remember feeling amongst us all, that we were very grateful. We weren't really sad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it wasn't like, oh God, it's over. It's
no,
like,
that last 6 weeks was a celebration. There's no question it was a celebration.
Yeah, it's like we would have wanted it to continue, of course, but it was like, okay, well, hey, there's nothing to complain about. Like we had a great time. We had a great run. It was more than what one could even have expected it to be. So it's like, hey, you know, sometimes you got to die because nobody can live forever, you know, like, and it's nothing to be sad about. Nothing bad happened. It's just what it is. And I just remember we were very happy. We were very happy. Like we knew it felt different because we were ending it, but at the same time, we were really upbeat. Really, nobody was down in the dumps or anything like that.
No.
Afterwards,
I was going to say the crash comes after.
Yeah. I remember being depressed for like 6 months. I didn't get out of bed till like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, it was just like terrible.
Yeah.
Overcoat and underpants.